So what we agreed to talk about today, uh, we we discussed talking about this before. Just I don't know. I got busy this weekend doing community stuff for Final Fantasy 14. I don't know where you were, but why didn't you do my job for me?
Like,
What?
I was waiting for you to say what we were doing. You're the producer.
I know. I'm the worst.
You are the worst, of course.
So I saw Dejara do some links about microtransactions, and I thought that would be a good topic to talk about. Especially with some recent news coming out of Blizzard. Well, this isn't recent, but I was saving off about talking about it until I had more information about it. About the mass firings and their announcement of like most revenue year.
Right, high revenue year.
Right, and then immediate layoffs. Like I thought that was interesting. I was waiting to get more information about it first.
Right. Yeah, maybe this might be a good thing to start with, talking about kind of in general the business of games.
Mm-hmm.
Something I know a little bit about because I did help write a book on business and legal issues in the games industry. So,
You want to plug your book?
didn't I just?
Nice.
Buy
it at most retail stores.
Actually, I think it's out of print right now.
Oh, is it?
To be honest, yeah. But the long and short of it is that games are a business, and so like the story in question is basically Activision Blizzard, going in an investor call and saying, "Oh, we've had the highest amount of revenue ever. We're doing great, and now we're going to fire 800 people because as a cost saving measure." And so like a lot of people kind of look at it and say, well, you're making a lot of money, why are you firing people? And the answer of course is like you need to make enough money.
Right.
Is part of the issue. The other issue is like you can bring in a lot. I mean, basically it's the nature of investor calls like this where you want to emphasize the positive. So like if you made a lot of money but then you spent even more, you emphasize the fact that we've had the most revenue possible. Even if your profits are low. I mean, like that's why they say that's why they're saying that we had incredible revenues, not incredible profits.
Right.
So like it's entirely possible for a company to have large revenues, but then also need to cut costs because because the costs are too high for what they're doing. So this becomes interesting because there's a lot of there's a lot to games business that is kind of subtle. Like when I worked for Storybricks, the CEO kind of came from outside of games, and he was very much like he was a gamer, he's a game player, and he knew business, and kind of like he's like, oh hey cool, I can kind of like I understand these two things. I understand games as a game player, and I understand business, so let me go do a game business thing. And it turned out, that's actually you may think these two things are related, they're not always. And right. So there's just a lot of subtlety. Like I think one of the big problems we run into in game development is the fact that you're making a creative product, and while you can take steps to basically kind of like turn this into a predictable process, that's not always how you're going to get the most creative results, basically. So for like I think I pull from a another example that I don't know if maybe people are gonna be familiar with, but like I forget the guy's first name. Thomas Kincaid. Does these like really kind of very very pretty paintings. He's called the painter of light. Makes amazing landscape portraits. Stuff that people really love to hang above their wall fireplace.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, it's basically a factory. He's got he's got a he's basically got people cranking out pictures. He hires artists. And like they're fine and they're very appealing pictures. But like you're not gonna get the next Picasso isn't gonna be the person that was slaving away in Thomas Kincaid's painting factory.
Right. It's kind of the Disney of art.
Right. I mean, yeah, Disney is probably another good way to look at it, where like, like you have and I'm not saying like corporations stifle creativity, blah blah blah. It's basically kind of the nature of business that you want to turn any sort of process into something predictable. And the more predictable you can make something, the better it is, because then basically you can plan around it and you can make business forecasts and fun things like that. Things that are important to running a business.
Numbers.
Right, exactly. Having objective data, collecting data and using data to and having data that helps you make decisions is a good thing. Is a very good thing. So, but the problem we run into, of course, is that again, kind of go back to what I was talking about a little bit before, which is one of the reasons I brought up. You only get what you measure, and so if you're measuring how fast do people how fast do games get made, and how fast can they be sold and things like that. Well, that's what you're gonna get games that are made faster, sold faster, sell more things. And this is kind of like where we get microtransactions, because microtransactions are things that basically like you can add into a game pretty easily. Like now that the infrastructure for handling things like charges for smaller amounts, and people have gotten used to it. It's pretty easy to basically kind of like slap in an API, and sell lock boxes, or have lock boxes drop and sell keys or whatever, in order to basically increase the amount of revenue that a game can make. And so. And like at the end of the day, as much as we might want games to be this fun and wonderful thing, the reality is we live in a capitalist society, and everything is measured on value and what can and what can be earned from something. Which essentially means that games are a business. Games need to make money. People need to make money in order to eat, to pay rent, to take care of their families. We can't, as much as game developers might love to have the notion of having a magic wand they can wave and just kind of like, nope, you can make whatever creative thing you want. The reality is that no, we actually have to kind of, we're bound by tastes, and essentially, what we can convince people is worthwhile spending their money on.
Right, and you actually linked me a YouTube video talking about Blizzard in particular.
Right, and it's full of hyperbole.
For anyone wondering, it's a Jim Sterling video talking.
Yeah, Jimquisition.
Yeah. You can look it up. I forget what it's. I I forget the exact name of the video. You can find it. It's his most recent video of this from this period of time.
And kind of the one that his big point was, kind of arguing that Bobby Kotick should be fired to the CEO.
That's
of
it. Yeah.
Activision.
But one of the big points that I noticed he brought up was that Activision Blizzard grew too quickly.
Right, and this is so kind of speaking on a meta business level. One of the issues you run into is that businesses are not judged purely on profit, but on growth.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is that because the idea is if you have $100 to invest, you want to invest in the best thing possible.
You want to get $10,000 out of your $100 theoretically.
Right. Not $1,000. And so what the things that are worth the most are basically things that are not just valuable, but the things that are increasing in value. Because if I buy $100 of gold, which is a very expensive item, and it's very shiny and pretty, but that $100 of gold never increases. Well, I've just changed my money, my liquid currency, into something that's a lot less flexible.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip side, if the value of gold, if I buy $100 of gold and it's increasing in value, so that I'm my $100 of gold, some months down the line is now worth $120. Well, that's great. Because if I invested $1 million into this, then I've got 1.2 million. I want something that's increasing in value, and something that's increasing in value at a faster rate is even better. And so so it's not enough to kind of make money, but you need to kind of be constantly making more money. Showing that you can invest as a company, you can take X $1 million or whatever for a game, and then turn that into Y $1 million, where Y is a much greater value, much greater amount of money. And if you basically can do that, then that's basically what makes the value of a company, as reflected by the share price, increase. Because people say, oh, these people are very good at turning money into even more money.
Right, but go ahead. Sorry.
And so this is like specifically where if Hot Game Part 2 sells a lot, and then Hot Game Part 3 doesn't sell as much, that's why it's a disappointment. Even if Hot Game 3 is still selling more than 95% of the other games out there.
Right.
It's still a disappointment because right. Because the idea is, well, if we had just made Hot Game Part 2 again, we would have made more money.
And that's how we keep getting Skyrim.
Skyrim Enhanced Edition.
Oh my goodness. I read Skyrim on the Switch was one of the most sold games on the Switch, third-party games on the Switch.
Yeah, I can see it.
It's just like, there's some really good third-party games this generation, and y'all are still playing Skyrim.
Well, I mean, and that's kind of like a little bit of the the frustration. Is that it's easy to predict what people will want, and it's one of the reasons why we see so many sequels in games. Mm-hmm. Is because it's pretty easy to see that people liked game if people liked Oblivion, which some people did, Elder Scrolls Oblivion, then hey, Elder Scrolls Skyrim is probably going to sell pretty consistently a large amount of money. And then and then if you can even kind of make it even easier than that, Skyrim on the PC sold a lot, and Skyrim on the Xbox sold a lot, so Skyrim on the Switch is probably going to sell a lot.
Right.
Because and people try to kind of people tend to stick with what they know or what they enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote about this on my blog, talking a little bit about I think I called it the Innovator's Dilemma or something like that. Where if you're trying something new, the problem is you're generally kind of forging new paths. And this is one of the reasons why you see companies just kind of endlessly exploiting the same IP, because they're looking for ways to kind of to use what people have already shown they're interested in order to, you know, create other things that people are going to be interested in.
And that's and think about like IP inertia, new IP inertia.
Right.
Why it was kind of a big deal that Blizzard went and made Overwatch as a new IP instead of trying to, you know, Heroes of the Storm, you know, other IPs into it.
Right.
But then Blizzard's really good at, you know, figuring out what people want and how to sell it to them.
Yeah. Well, in the past, you know, I think, you know, we've said before on so whatnot, like Blizzard's whole MO is basically to take an existing thing and kick it up a notch.
Right.
I mean, yeah, as much as we want to say Overwatch is kind of this neat new IP, it's still based on other types of games.
Well, I just meant like the IP of like the backstory
right.
that they've written for it, the characters, like they're.
Well, but I mean, they do that, you know, but they do that occasionally.
Right.
You know, like, you know, the story of Warcraft was, you know, was new at one point. The story of StarCraft was new at one point. The story of, you know, World of Warcraft kind of riffs off of Warcraft 3, but you know, there's a lot of kind of original stuff there. Like, you know, they do try new things, but the thing is, like, you know, usually there's something there that kind of hooks you into it, so it's not a completely alien feeling thing.
Right.
So, for example, like, you know, either a gameplay genre popular, which, you know, Blizzard does very well, taking existing genres, and, you know, World of Warcraft, you know, like there's plenty of MMOs before World of Warcraft. Blizzard just kind of came along and did it, you know, used its marketing muscle, you know, its intellectual properties, and, you know, its talented game developers to, you know, to give people something, you know, that, you know, was a lot more, you know, the base to generate a lot more sales.
Right. And going back to the Blizzard thing, there was a lot of kerfuffle, words. There's a lot of words about the CFO getting like a $15 million bonus just for taking the position.
Right. And you know, this is, yeah, I mean, this is pretty typical. I mean, this is basically because games have become a large industry. I mean, and like this is like, you know, this is something I've talked about quite a bit. Like, games are a large industry. They're $1 billion. They're larger than, you know, like domestic movies, for the most part. And so you know, we're starting to see basically companies, like Electronic Arts, like Activision, a lot of those, you know, companies become these giant behemoths.
I'm just gonna respond real fast.
Okay.
I lost my Helio, so.
I see. Become these giant behemoths, and, like, you know, and so, you know, just like you see in a lot of other industries, you know, people running, you know, billion-dollar companies want, you know, big, you know, large compensation. And we can talk about kind of the interesting nature, we'll say, the interesting incestuous nature of, you know, corporate American boardrooms, but needless to say, you know, not everybody gets to, you know, not everybody has the opportunity to become a, you know, big company CFO and get. And to be fair, like, the majority of that compensation was in stock, which there's generally a lockout period, so you can't just, you know, take that and ka-ching, become, you know, get $30 million. You know, he's got $30 million of stock. To be fair, though, like, he does, you know, like, most of the times this type of thing, you know, people can borrow against assets. But yeah, but on the, you know, so on the top end, you know, the executives kind of generate, you know, get a lot of income, because this is corporate America, and, you know, they run, you know, billion-dollar companies, so they, you know, they get their bonuses. But the flip side is, like, at the smaller end, though, like, you have a culture that basically, frankly, doesn't really respect, you know, developers, where um, where developers are kind of seen as almost disposable because, and I've used this joke before. There's an infinite supply of 24-year-olds.
Right, right.
There's an endless, there's an endless and growing pool of people that grew up playing games, think games, video games are so cool, and would do anything to have this, theoretical dream job. When the reality, of course, is that most people don't stick around, in that job because it, the industry tends to, treat people like a meat grinder. They don't care if somebody burns out because they can get some other, right, they can get another kind of young and enthusiastic kid in there to to toe the line.
Yeah, which that mentality actually makes me think about something I read from Nintendo, where it's actually in their hiring policy not to hire gamers as developers, because they believe that stifles the creative process for making their games.
I mean, you can argue that. I personally don't agree. I think a good developer, has knowledge of not only the past but also isn't constrained by the past.
Right. Yeah, it might have been developed. They might have said designers in particular. I don't remember the exact wording of the article. But their explanation for that was they felt that gamers would try to capture what they've already experienced instead of trying to create something new. Instead of trying to create a new experience.
I mean that's basically kind of like saying, well, if I want somebody to paint my house really well, I'm gonna hire someone that's never picked up a paintbrush.
Right, right.
Because they'll be too conformed into thinking like, oh, a house needs to be painted this way. Sometimes that's what you want. Like sometimes
right.
you want the calm and steady person.
Right.
Doing things like that.
I just think that that's an interesting difference in philosophy.
Right. I mean, the other part of that too, of course, is that Nintendo's a Japanese company, so that that instantly kind of makes things a little more fun, we'll say.
Interesting.
Right.
And on the topic of Nintendo, in regards to the Jim Sterling video that he brought up, where Nintendo was not meeting their projection goals for the Wii U and for
the 3DS.
The 3DS, when they were having lawsuit issues with that. The executives all took pay cuts from their salaries to make up the difference. So I was just wondering what your thoughts on that. If it was, the skeptical part of my brain says, oh well, that's kind of a PR thing for them to say, hey, look at us, we'll take the hit for our company. But then the optimistic part of my brain goes, oh, they're just very faithful in their company and they take care of it.
Right. And I don't know, especially for a Japanese company, like how compensation is structured.
Right.
Like you were talking about with the CFO, like people are always getting $35 million. Well, he's not getting quite that much. He's getting $900,000 in salary, a year in salary. He's getting so much stock options. He's getting so much stock grants. He's getting performance bonuses and whatnot. I mean, it could entirely be that the Nintendo executives basically took a hit in their salary, but then basically made it up some other way, like they got more stock, grants, or maybe they got performance, maybe part of the salary went into a performance bonus.
Right.
If you can basically turn the company around, okay, yeah, you took 50% of your salary. You were making $700,000 a year. Now you're gonna be making $350,000 a year. But we're gonna tack on $350,000 to, probably $1.5 million, performance bonus. So now it's gonna be about $2 million performance bonus.
So it just turns into more of a indirect.
Right. And so you can say, oh, I lost salary, but I'm still getting compensated. It's tied more to company performance, which in theory it should be. And so I mean, the question is, of course, there can be other potential motivations for this as well. If they were cutting salaries across the board, they just couldn't afford to pay people as much as they were, and they want everybody to take 10% cuts to their salary. Well, the point is saying, oh, well, the CEO is taking a 50% cut. What are you complaining about?
Right.
Even though, in reality, it's a lot easier for the executive to take a 50% cut in salary than the rank and file to take the 10, 15, whatever percent cut that they had.
But yeah, I just thought that was interesting because we're talking about American capitalism in the industry, and then look at the Japanese companies, which carry very different philosophies.
Right, and it's potentially very interesting to kind of it could be interesting to take a look at that and see exactly to see what else was happening around that time. Because you take again, it's going to go back to that. You take some data out of context and you can interpret it in one way.
Mm-hmm.
Add different context, add more understanding, and then all of a sudden you might view things in a different light.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying the salary cut was a good thing or a bad thing, or a ploy or an earnest thing.
Because as we talked about before, as much as we like to view Nintendo as a friendly, happy company, it is a company.
they are still a business. And some crystals are on my waypoint. They're still a business that still needs to make money. Still operates under the auspices of capitalism. It's just that basically they have different cultural contexts to work from. And so and I mean, this is again kind of like the big benefit of the in some ways this has been the big benefit of the indie kind of revolution, where it's kind of created this thing where kind of let some people kind of break away from the capitalist, the heavy capitalism side of things, the mega corporation elements, allowing them to potentially make games that couldn't be made otherwise, or to be more independent, to see more benefit from their more benefit from their personal work than they might see at a larger company.
So what you're saying is Mighty Number 9 was an amazing hit.
I'm saying that the designer probably shouldered a lot more of the success and or failure of that than he would have still been at Capcom.
Right. Sorry, I had to.
I mean, sometimes you get things, you get, looking at looking at Kickstarter and the types of games that Kickstarter. Oops.
Oh, okay, you're right there. I gotcha.
But looking at Kickstarter and the type of games that get basically, Kickstarter. You get, you can kind of, generally what happened was that developers were able to basically make games that like corporate America, the game, kind of the larger game corporations saw as no longer being viable for whatever reason.
Right.
Venture games, ish
2D
PvP MMOs. right. Niche, PvP MMOs, things like that. These have gotten a lot more attention.
Oh,
Um,
okay. That wasn't supposed to play a noise.
oh,
Let me fix that.
I changed it so it played a noise when
Yeah.
when we were trying to save during Astroneers.
Which just makes me have to edit that out later. I know.
Surprise!
Oh my goodness.
No, we need to talk about this for the next 15 minutes. So when you edit it out, it's gonna be just kind of awkward. Like, what are they talking about?
Right.
What tone? What noise?
Oh
going
my
crazy.
goodness.
Yeah, and so and this is one of the reasons why I've been such a big advocate of indie developers, and kind of explaining to people like we kind of need to give indie some love, especially the people that don't make the mega hits, because like this is where we're going to see a lot of kind of the novelty. A lot of the big games that have come out have been either like complete surprises or accidents. Kind of the infamous example being like The Sims, which is one of the best-selling, PC games of all time.
No,
Was
I've never
basically,
played.
I mean, like it's not everybody's cup of tea, but like it sold amazingly well, and the only reason it got made was because Will Wright, basically, the designer of a lot of the other Sim games, basically kind of worked on it, kind of secretly. And they, and then he basically took it to the Electronic Arts executives. When it was done, it's like, hey, I've spent all this time on this thing. You can sell it or not. And they went, fine, we'll sell it. And it basically turned out to be this massive hit. But like EA, outside of that, was not going to make The Sims. There's no mechanism within EA for them to go, oh, hey, we should totally make this type of crazy game that's never been made before.
And now it has like $5,000 worth of DLC.
Oh yeah. I mean, like the games. Yeah, I mean, so this talking about The Sims is probably a great seg into the into talking about microtransactions and
Right.
DLC.
expansions,
Right.
loot
Because
boxes, like
dear God, was The Sims ever the king of that?
Well, I don't know. I think what was it? Euro Truck Simulator 2013.
I mean, there's been others that kind of have come along to potentially kind of try to dethrone it, but they sold a lot of content, and this was also a game that had a lot of mod tools in addition to this. So but so they were able to kind of sell, but not only could you download like things that Electronic Arts couldn't or wouldn't make, but you can also download the official packs and in theory have a quality experience.
Right. So, yeah, that was actually a really good segue. Good job.
Aha!
I know.
Broken clock is right twice a day.
So, as you might be able to tell, ooh, we might want to just extract.
Oh. Yeah, this is the problem. I got too blathering.